Alright, so this movie has given me reviewer's block. I don't know if it's just this movie or just the week I've had or what, but this is now the 5th time I have stopped and restarted this video. It's ridiculous. And I'm a one-take pony, but this is just getting me. So you know what? I'm not even going to try to do a cute intro. I'm just going into this and fuck it, alright? So, this film, cross-cultural film, which I'm always in favor of. I tend to find those very, very interesting. One of my favorite movies from a few years back was Everybody Loves Somebody, which is a cross-cultural film from Mexico, which I really enjoyed. And I am all for cross-culture films because I think the more we cross cultures, the better off we are as a race. And I mean that as the human race. I think, once we start breaking down some of those barriers and letting art kind of be our guide, I think, that's always the way to go. So when you get a cross-cultural film, it's always going to be interesting. And this film was interesting. I'm just not sure if it was good. So, basic story, if you haven't heard of it, which I didn't hear about it until, earlier today. It's a Chinese film where Awkwafina, I believe is the actor's name, plays a young Chinese-American girl whose family finds out that her grandmother has been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And the doctors give her like 3 months to live. And the family has decided not to tell the grandmother that she's dying. And they want to use the wedding of one of their cousins as a big excuse to get everybody together to see Grandma, without Grandma knowing that this is all kind of a preliminary wake almost. And Awkwafina, who plays the character Billy, is, having been raised primarily in America, is very upset by this, by them not telling her. So it becomes this kind of going home, family reunion, and the constant question, and a little bit of the culture clash of, do we tell Grandma that she's dying, or will the thing you're always kind of wondering is, is Billy gonna crack and kind of tell her? So right away you have a really interesting premise, one that could be used for a great comedy or a great drama. It also, again, going with that cross-cultural angle, it's a really interesting cross-cultural debate. Billy's uncle brings up the point in the film that it's a different in value systems, that with the Chinese, at least as the Chinese as presented by this film, you aren't hiding the truth from her out of selfishness. You are doing it out of love to carry the emotional burden for the person so that they can live their last days happy. There's another great scene where Billy's aunt, or great aunt, I should say, tells her that, Billy asks her, when she finally finds out she's dying, isn't she going to be mad at us? And her great aunt says, why would she be? She did the same thing. When our father was dying, she didn't tell him, So it's there's this interesting thing of somebody born into one culture, raised in another, and trying to deal with one of the big milestones of life, i.e. the death of a loved one, through a culture's eyes that you are familiar with but you haven't lived in. So there's a lot of interesting things that the story does with that concept. Problem is, I don't think they did enough with it. Before I get into nitpicks or my issues with this film, let's talk about some good things. I think I have to give Awkwafina some credit. I'm going to badmouth her acting here in a little bit, but before I badmouth it, I'm going to praise her acting. I always think it's a good thing when I think a performance is good when you can see an actor in two separate things and not realize it's the same person. You know, they've altered their performance so much that you don't even know it's the same person. I didn't realize until the end that that Awkwafina was also the obnoxious friend in that Crazy Rich Asians. And I was like, oh, that kind of made me have greater respect for her as an actor. So it's like, wow, you really played two very diametrically opposed characters here. So I got to give her credit. I'm going to badmouth her acting here in a minute, so I want to get that out of the way first. I also think the relationship between Billy and Nana, the grandmother, as I think I'm pronouncing it right, was very fun to watch. And very, very sweet. There's a lot of fun things in it, a lot of cute things, and I think this movie really aimed for a cross-cultural feel, kind of like Fiddler on the Roof. When Fiddler on the Roof was first produced, backers were concerned the story was too Jewish, that people who weren't Jewish wouldn't understand it, and it turns out that people of all cultures can understand their traditions changing and young people making lives for themselves that aren't maybe that don't fit in with the parents' views, and this film kind of does the same thing. Where it's like, yes, it's a very Chinese film with a very Chinese feel, but the story of bonding between families and issues between families and little snipes between families, but ultimately the love between families is very clear and very universal. I think anybody of any race, creed, or color could go see this film and probably do like I did and go, okay, that's my family, that's my family, that's my family, that's my family, So I really enjoyed that. I thought that was very well done. But here's the problem. This movie is an independent film. And for me, independent films have some very telltale signs that I just cannot stand. Because, as I've laid out, there is an interesting concept here that is explored. But the independent filmmaker tends to get in their own way sometimes. They try to film things differently or on the cheap or with subtext and with a look and everything. And I think a lot of times it does not work. And maybe it just doesn't work for me. It might work for other people, but for me it doesn't work. Let me give you some examples. Now this film does avoid the independent film pitfall that I mentioned in things like Manchester by the Sea, where 80% of it is just putting the camera out the window and filming the scenery. So it does avoid that. So I'll give it that point. But it also has the independent film problem of scenes don't feel like they happen because they advance the story or because they advance a character development. Scenes just kind of happen. Arguments just kind of happen, and then scenes just kind of abruptly end. This could be more of a thing of me being a playwright and, writing self-contained scenes, because you can't do cuts a lot. It's something I'm always cautioning students about when they're writing plays, that you can't just do, five-line scenes. In a play, you've got to have those scenes last a bit and, be flushed out. you know, and it didn't feel like that was going on here. More to the point, none of the scenes ever seemed to lead to anything. The scenes with Billy and Nana were good, but then there's scenes with her, with Billy, with her father, with her mother, with her uncle, and none of them, they hint at things, they bring things up, like apparently her father has a bit of a drinking problem. Nana never approved of her mother. The whole thing about not showing emotion and all this, and then Billy being mad because they left China, and when her grandfather died, they never told her. Just a lot of things that just kind of come up, don't feel like they get resolved, or don't feel like they lead to anything, and then just go away. Now, some stickler may come to me and say, well, that's what real life is like. That is true. But if I wanted to watch real life, I'd watch a documentary. I'm watching a narrative. And when I watch something with a narrative, I'm looking for narrative structure. And independent films love to play with that structure, and I think it weakens their film. I mentioned Awkwafina's acting chops and my newly found respect for her, in terms of playing different characters. That being said, I did not really like the acting in this. I like her acting as a body of work, like say this and Crazy Rich Asians, showing her range. But this performance, I don't think was very good, because again, it falls into the independent film trap of acting is just looking sad a lot. Just looking and no emotion in the face. And yes, Billy is supposed to be trying to hide her emotions and all that, and not being very good at it, but it comes across just as the actor staring blankly, and it's dull to watch. It's even like there's even a great scene in there where the grandmother is telling her, when we're at the wedding, you need to smile and you need to greet people very big. No, auntie, uncle, she's giving her like etiquette lessons, and I was like, could we give her some of that for the rest of the movie? Because I'd like to actually see the emotions she's going through and see the inner struggle in her a little bit more than just staring at the camera. And she walks with such a hunch in this. You almost think she's a hunchback. Like she's got such a curve to her spine. Like I say, plot points or character beats are brought up and never addressed. Again, they keep mentioning that her father drinks too much, and it's like, is this gonna lead to something? Is he gonna get drunk and tell Nana that she is dying? Is that nothing really comes of it? Nothing happens. So why bring it up? Why make it a point? The only thing I can think of is that this movie says it's based on an actual lie. I think the writer-director, I think this is probably a true story from her own family. So she's probably using her own family as models. And like I said, in real life, probably this thing didn't really come into play during this event. It was just something that happened. But again, I'm watching a narrative. You bring up something. Alcoholism in this character. What is that saying about this character in this situation? How is that going to affect this character in this situation? And when it doesn't, it's a question of is this going to be a thing about Billy's relationship to her father, which they always kind of hint at is strained. They hint at her relationship with both her parents is strained, but then not. So again, you bring this stuff up and there's no, and again, give me the excuse, well, that's how it is in real life, but I'm not watching real life, am I? That being said, I must say, in scenes where they kind of let the actors go, there's some really good stuff. Probably the best scene in the movie is when they go to the grandfather's grave and pay tribute and leave offerings. The dialogue, the performances there, it all feels so natural, like they're, like they are a family. It doesn't feel stilted and scripted. It feels like, the way a family. That's one of those moments I'm like, that's my family right there. So yeah. I also got to say this about this movie. Boy, this is going to sound so bad. I hope this is... I don't know if this is racist, and normally these days, if you don't know if something is racist, it probably is. Boy, this movie made me hungry for Chinese food, because all they fucking did in this movie was eat. Oh my God, they ate so much in this movie. Almost every scene was at a dinner table. And I understand that, when you have a big family gathering, the time you have kind of everybody together is at a meal. So I get that. Trust me, I'm from I'm an only child, but I am part of a larger family, a large Italian-Irish family. So I get that, the times that everyone's together is at dinner. But boy, howdy, every other fucking scene they're eating, and you're just like, I could go for some sesame chicken right now. Again, I don't mean that to sound horrible, but it's like, you're just showing, it's kind of like coming out of Finding Nemo and going, fish sounds good for dinner. So yeah, this is the problem with these movies, because I respect the uniqueness of the story, because unique stories and unique points of view are so rare these days in media. So I respect the original story. I respect the cross-cultural elements of it. And I also like, there's something very important about cross-cultural films. I like that it doesn't play one culture against another. It has a little bit of the debate in there, but this isn't like Crazy Rich Asians, where it's, oh, you're an American Chinese, so you're not good enough kind of thing. It doesn't play the cultures against each other. It just kind of brings up that this is kind of the clash. This is kind of an issue. I respect certain performances, certain aspects of performances, but I really do feel like the filmmaker shot themselves in the foot a little bit. And if it turns out that, all these things I'm mentioning are actually hallmarks of classic Chinese filmmaking, then, sorry, ignorant, white, straight, male, American, so sorry if I'm not picking up on the nuances of Chinese cinema, but I have a feeling this is more a product of independent movie-itis. Because there's things I see in a lot of independent movies that I've watched that a lot of them do. They think that the dead face glare is somehow showing the complexity of the character's emotions. The juxtaposition scenes is somehow arty and is giving you more subtext than the lines do. I'm a script-driven guy. I like dialogue. Okay, I'm a dialogue guy. Not that a scene can't be silent, but my personal taste is I prefer a scene with some good dialogue that really shows you two actors bouncing off each other. So again, this film is interesting, but I don't know if interesting equals good. So I think that's kind of all I've got to say on this one. So final grade for The Farewell. I'm gonna say a C+, and I think I'm being hard on the movie. I really do. I think I'm being too hard on it. I'm gonna say a C+. But I think I'm being too hard on it, but at the same time, I feel like giving it a B is being too generous. If there was a letter grade between B and C, I'd do that. But, you don't get to work in that way. All right, so that was my first trip back to Ridgeway since I've been home, and the world is about to get crazy, folks. School starts up on Monday. Gonna be another year at the old teaching post, and I wish I could say I was ready. I don't feel ready. So, but the good news is no matter how bad the week is, no matter how stressed I am, there's always a movie on the weekend, and there's always drive home reviews. So, thank you for watching, and join me for another school year. So until next time, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.